Hello, everyone. Michael Zadai here. I'm starting a new series, which I think you'll find very interesting. And it's on the subject of hell. And so, what I would like to do is, first of all, make something very clear. Um, there are some things in the Christian belief system that are not in the Apostles' Creed. So, the Apostles' Creed, which was, I think, the fourth century, the reason it was put in there. Um, the reason they wrote the Apostles' Creed was saying this is what the Christian church believes, no compromise. Okay, so then we have all these other things that different churches believe, but that's okay, that are not in the Apostles' Creed, and hell is one of them. So we can talk about it, we can discuss it. So this is a discussion, and you may agree or not agree with me. I don't, that's fine. Do your own research, and so I just wanted to make that very clear as we venture into this theme. And I've done a lot of study about this over the years, and this is the first teaching that I've done on it. And it's interesting when I have had discussions with certain Christians, especially pastors, about hell. And I come from a point of view that where I'm at right now, anyway, growing. I'm always growing in knowledge and wisdom, and a lot of them get upset with me, And I said, "Well, have you studied? Have you researched it?" And most of them haven't. They just accept it. There's heaven and there's a hell, and unfortunately. What's happened in the Christian church, and this goes centuries back to the Roman Catholic Church for sure, it all of a sudden became about destination, heaven or hell. That's not the good news. That's not the gospel. And as we unfold this, you'll be able to see for yourself that that's not heaven and hell. We can talk about those things, but that's not the good news. Okay. So, let's begin with some facts here. Fact number one, hell, the word hell is never mentioned in the Old Testament. That's interesting, isn't it? The Hebrew word is Sheol, Sheol, and it simply means in Hebrew theology, Hebrew thought in the Old Testament, it just means the place of the departed dead. Whether good or bad, all people who died went to Sheol. It means the grave. So hell is never mentioned. Now, now you may have a King James Bible or some other versions, not all versions. They will reinterpret Sheol and say hell, which is definitely a theological bias, because that's not it. Hell, first of all, is not in Hebrew theology. It's definitely not Old Testament Hebrew theology. So why do they take this bias and translate Sheol into hell? Because that's what they are trying to get across, is that you're going to go to hell. But it's interesting that they only make that translation when it says the wicked. So it says the wicked will go to Sheol. The wicked will go to hell, but the righteous will go, to Sheol. So that's definitely for me. It's like, wow, you guys have no integrity. Have integrity. It's not about what you're trying to cause the scriptures to say for your theological bias. We have to know what the Bible actually says on all subjects. Let's look at some other facts. The very worst sin I want you to think about right now, ever recorded in the Bible or anywhere else. What do you think that is? Okay, let me give you my opinion and the opinion of many scholars. The very worst sin that was ever committed was Adam and Eve. Because when they disobeyed the Lord and they ate the apple, they were then no longer in fellowship with their Creator. Zoe life was taken from them, and that's why they died, is because Zoe, or the life as God has it, was taken from them slowly over 900 years. And then eventually the lifespan of human beings gets shorter and shorter till it's, 70, 80 years, whatever. So that is, to me, is the worst sin. So you would figure, God would say, oh, don't do that. Don't you eat that apple, because if you do, you are going to hell. He didn't say that. All right, let's look at another horrible sin, and that's when Cain and Abel, you know that story, right? Abel was offering correct sacrifices. Cain wasn't. Cain got angry and murdered his brother, murdered him. Now, God confronts Cain, and he doesn't say, you're going to hell. Hell's not mentioned. God sends him somewhere else. How about this one? Sodom and Gomorrah. Now, Sodom and Gomorrah, of course, is known, the reputation of sexual immorality at its worst. You have the story of Lot and his family, and you have these men banging outside the door because they want to have sex with Lot. They want to rape his wife and his children. That's horrible. And Sodom and Gomorrah is judged. The fire comes down and consumes God had enough. But hell's never mentioned with Sodom and Gomorrah. Okay, let's go over to Moses and the law that was given, handed to Moses, the Ten Commandments and the rest of the law. Just read through Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Exodus. Is there any warning of hell? No, there isn't. There isn't. Now, you may see that theological bias in there where they translated Sheol into hell, but it's not there. The word is not there. So it's interesting that God told Israel, he said it never entered his mind that they would sacrifice their children to him, because the nations around Israel would sacrifice their children to their gods, and Moloch was one of the pagan gods. And when the children of Israel began to worship the gods around them, and Moloch was one of them, they began to sacrifice their children. Now, God's wrath is real, and God's warning and warning and warning, and finally Israel participates in God's wrath, but it never says, I'm going to send you all to hell. Never says that. So what I wanted to just look at was, let me see here. It's very interesting to me that before hell was in Christian thought and theology, because it's not in Christian theology in the first couple of centuries. There's no talk about it. Look at Paul. Even if you look at the King James Bible where they're translating hell, it's nowhere in his writings. The Apostle Paul never mentions hell. That's interesting. And then when you look in the Gospels, it's only mentioned, I think, once. It's very few times that Jesus even mentioned hell. And once again, it's that theological bias that's translated hell anyway. But before hell was introduced into our theology, it was in pagan belief systems. And so one of them, I can't even pronounce their names here. Okay. Um, but here's an ancient historian, it's Polybus. Since the multitude is ever fickle, full of lawless desires, irrational passions, and violence, there's no way to keep them in order but by the fear and terror of the invisible world, on which account our ancestors seem to me to have acted judicially when they contrived to bring into the popular belief these notions of the gods and of the infernal regions, Hades. Okay. Then Dionysius says, treats the whole matter as useful but not as true. Another historian, Livy, the celebrated historian, speaks of it in the same spirit, and he praises the wisdom of Numa because he invented the fear of the gods as a most as a means of governing an ignorant and a barbaric populace. Strabo, he says, the multitude are restrained from vice by the punishments the gods are said to inflict upon offenders, and by those terrors and threatenings which certain dreadful words and monstrous forms imprint upon their minds, for it is impossible to govern the crowd of women and all the common rabble by philosophical reasoning and lead them to piety, holiness, and virtue. But this must be done by superstition or the fear of the gods by means of fables and wonders, for the thunder, the trident, the furies, the dragons, and all the fables, as is also all the ancient theology. These things the legislators used as scarecrows to terrify the childish multitude. And here's another ancient historian. After stating that the doctrine of rewards and punishments after death is necessary to society, he proceeds, for as we sometimes cure the body with unwholesome remedies, when such as are most wholesome produce no effect, so we restrain those minds with false relations which will not be persuaded by the truth. There is a necessity, therefore, of instilling the dread of foreign torments, as that the soul changes its habitation, that the coward is thrust into the body of a woman, the murderer imprisoned within the form of a savage beast, the vain and the inconstant changed into birds, and the slothful and ignorant into fishes. Plato, this is interesting. He's exceedingly inconsistent, sometimes adopted even in his serious discourses, the fables of the poets, and other times rejecting them as utter nonsense and giving too frightful views of the invisible world. Sometimes he argues on social grounds that they are necessary to restrain bad men from wickedness and crime, and then again he protests against them on political grounds as intimidating the citizens and making cowards of soldiers who, believing these things, are afraid of death and do not fight, therefore fight very well. Plutarch, he says, he treats the subject the same way, arguing that with great solemnity and earnestness, and on other occasions calling them fabulous stories, the tales of mothers and nurses. So now, what they're talking about here is this underworld, this hell, this place of suffering that you better live a little good life, or you're going to be thrown into Hades, and you're going to suffer all these horrible things. You know, they call it the infernal regions, terrible darkness, the prison, the river of flaming fire, the judgment seat. So when you look at some of these things, you find it in pagan belief systems. Now, this is interesting. These are some quotes from some Christian theologians and evangelists. Tertullian, he was a great church theologian. He said, "At that greatest of all spectacles, the last and eternal judgment, how shall I admire? How I will laugh! How I will rejoice and exult when I behold so many proud monarchs groaning in the lowest abyss of darkness. Jonathan Edwards. Reprobate. Gosh, I don't. This is hard for me to even get my mind around this. He was an evangelist in the early stages of our nation. And this is what he says about babies that are thrown into the fires of hell. Reprobate infants are vipers of vengeance, which Jehovah will hold over hell in the tongs of his wrath till they turn and spit venom in his face. Thomas Aquinas. That the saints may enjoy their beatitudes more thoroughly and give more abundant thanks for it to God, a perfect sight of the punishment of the damned is granted. Now, these people are saying that they're going to enjoy, I guess from a heavenly place, looking down into the fires of hell and watching people suffer. They're going to enjoy it. They're going to, sip their heavenly tea and drink their potato chips and watch people suffer. Where do you see the love of Jesus in that? Did he ever mention anything like that? Did Paul, did John? No, they didn't. They didn't at all. So, and then finally, Jeremy Taylor says, husbands shall see their wives, parents shall see their children tormented before their eyes. The bodies of the damned shall be crowded together in hell like grapes in a winepress, which press on another till they burst. Wow. Well, my time went real fast. I don't like to talk more than 15 minutes or so. But I'm doing an introduction into the historical belief systems, opinions, and the development of this place called hell. So keep your seatbelt on, because we're going to delve into a lot of first historical things. We're going to look at scriptures and things of that nature. But one of the things that strikes me the most is that hell is never mentioned in the Old Testament at all. At all. At all. And it's only these interpreters who decide to put their bias on the word Sheol and change it into hell when it's not that word at all. So it's very important for us to understand that integrity matters. It really does matter. So blessings, and we'll see you next time on the subject of hell.